She is awake the entire time. At 10, she is talking at the bar, ordering another drink, laughing at something. At 1 in the morning, she finds her coat, says goodbye to people by name, and gets herself home. The next afternoon, those 3 hours are not missing from her memory. They were never in it. She was conscious for every minute, and behind her temples, synapses in a small memory circuit had stopped doing the one thing that turns an evening into a memory. Here is the step that failed. In each temporal lobe sits the hippocampus, a curled ridge of tissue that binds the pieces of an experience, the room, the voices, the order things happened, into one episode you can pull back later. It does that by strengthening particular connections. Glutamate crosses the gap between two cells, and a receptor called NMDA opens only when the receiving cell is already active, letting calcium in. That calcium is the instruction. Make this connection stronger. Alcohol blocks that receptor. The traffic keeps arriving. The synapse just never gets stronger. In one of the early studies of this, heavily intoxicated men could describe what had just happened if you asked 2 minutes later. Ask again after 30 minutes, and it was gone. The information had been in their heads. It never got fixed there. The molecule doing this is absurdly small. 2 carbons, an oxygen, a few hydrogens, smaller than a molecule of sugar. The old explanation was that something this simple could only work bluntly, dissolving into the fatty membranes around neurons and making them sloppy. That turned out to be wrong. At the concentrations a real drinker reaches, there is nowhere near enough ethanol in a membrane to disorder it. What there is enough of is ethanol slipping into small pockets on particular proteins and changing how they open and close. Change one amino acid lining a pocket, and that channel stops responding to alcohol at all. A solvent does not behave like that. And ethanol does it in many places at once. NMDA receptors, GABA receptors, potassium channels, with no single master target that is ever held up. Keep the number climbing, and the failures move. Judgment goes early, which is also why a depressant can feel like a stimulant. The part of the brain doing the inhibiting is among the first to go quiet, and dopamine rises while it does. Then the inner ear. Inside each semicircular canal is a jelly flap called the cupula, sitting in fluid of exactly the same density, so gravity does not push it around when your head is still. Alcohol reaches the flap before it reaches the fluid. For a while, the flap is lighter than what surrounds it, so it floats, and floating is the signal your brain reads as turning. Lie down in the dark, and your inner ear reports that the room is rotating, because a piece of it genuinely is drifting. Far higher up, it reaches the medulla, where the circuits that set your breathing rhythm live, and they stop answering properly to rising carbon dioxide. That failure, together with a lost gag reflex, is one of the central ways an alcohol overdose becomes fatal. Aspiration, temperature failure, heart rhythm problems, and other depressant drugs can also contribute. None of it runs on a schedule, though. The ranges overlap, tolerance shifts them, and how fast the number is climbing matters as much as where it lands. So, where does the blackout sit? Loosely. It has been seen from around 0.06%, but in the small studies that tracked it directly, most people were far higher, near 0.20, and a fast climb seems to matter more than the peak. 2 shapes turn up. The fragmentary kind leaves holes. A reminder can sometimes fill back in. The bloc kind is a clean, bounded gap, where no cue brings anything back, because there is nothing to cue. About half of college drinkers surveyed say they have had one. All of this ends when the ethanol is gone, and getting rid of it is the least flexible part of the story. Your liver runs one production line with 2 stations. At the first, an enzyme called alcohol dehydrogenase strips two hydrogens off ethanol and turns it into acetaldehyde. At the second, inside the mitochondria, aldehyde dehydrogenase turns that acetaldehyde into acetate, which the body burns as ordinary fuel. The first station is the bottleneck, and it saturates almost as soon as you start drinking. Every copy of the enzyme is already busy, so more ethanol does not speed it up. A queue forms, and the line clears at whatever fixed rate it runs, averaged across studies about 0.15% of blood alcohol an hour, and it varies a lot between people. That is why a graph of someone sobering up is a straight diagonal, rather than a curve that tails off. Coffee, a cold shower, a walk, food afterwards, they change how awake a person feels, and they do not touch the slope of that line. It does not take requests. Now slow the second station down. Roughly 700 million people carry a version of that second enzyme with a single amino acid swapped, most commonly in East Asian populations, and it runs at a fraction of normal speed. Station 1 still produces acetaldehyde at full pace, so the queue backs up between the two. The flush, hot face, thumping heart, nausea after one drink is what that backlog looks like from outside. The flush is the visible part. Acetaldehyde is chemically hungry. It bonds straight onto DNA bases and jams the machinery that copies them. And a copying fork that runs into one of those lesions can collapse into a broken chromosome. Two things normally stop that: the second enzyme clearing the acetaldehyde, and a repair system built for exactly this damage. That chemistry is the concrete reason alcoholic drinks have been a Group 1 carcinogen since 1987, which is a statement about how certain the evidence is, not how dangerous any particular amount is. The 2025 U.S. Surgeon General's advisory put the modeled American burden near 97,000 cancer cases a year, and the worldwide count above 700,000. Which leaves the thing almost everyone says about alcohol and the brain, and that the evidence does not support. It kills brain cells. In 1993, a Danish team counted them: 11 men with chronic alcoholism, 11 matched controls, every neuron in the neocortex estimated properly. The alcohol group, 23.4 billion. The controls, 23.2. No difference. What was different was everything between the cells. White matter, the insulated cabling running between regions, was down about 11%, and the older cortex around the hippocampus by about 30%. 11 brains a group is a very small study, and it does not prove no neuron ever dies. But what it points at, and what modern imaging supports, is degraded wiring rather than missing cells. And wiring partly comes back. Brain volume measurably recovers over weeks to months without alcohol, which is not the same as harmless. Heavy drinking also strips the body of thiamine, vitamin B1, which brain cells need to burn glucose, and starving those circuits injures small structures deep in the brain. That produces Korsakoff syndrome, someone who permanently cannot lay down new memories, a nutritional injury wearing alcohol's name. Back to the woman who got herself home. Nothing about that evening was destroyed. Her neurons were all still there in the morning. One small step, in one small structure, the strengthening that turns an hour into something you can go back and get, had been switched off while everything else kept running. She was there for all of it. She is just the only person in that room who will never know what happened. And if any of this raises a question about your own drinking, the person to ask is a doctor, not a video.